Imagine this, you're driving across town to visit your parents. A camera flashes. A week later, a fine arrives in your mailbox. Not because you were speeding, not because you ran a red light, but because you left your neighborhood. Now imagine someone tells you that's exactly where society is heading. No more driving wherever you want, no more freedom of movement, cities divided into zones, travel permits, government surveillance, an open-air prison. It sounds like the plot of a dystopian movie, but millions of people genuinely believe this is what 15-minute cities are designed to become. Some protested in the streets, some called it the Great Reset, others warned it was the beginning of a global lockdown that would never end. And here's the strange part, it all started with an urban planning idea. Today we're going to answer one question. How did a proposal about making cities more convenient become one of the internet's biggest conspiracy theories? And more importantly, is any of it actually true? Every week on Why It's Not True, we investigate one conspiracy that's spreading online. Separate fact from fiction and find out what really happened. This week, the 15-minute city. If you've spent any time on social media over the past few years, you've probably seen claims like these. They're trapping us. You'll need permission to leave your zone. They're turning cities into open-air prisons. The government wants to control where you travel. Some posts even claimed people would receive fines simply for leaving their neighborhood too often. And judging by the comments, thousands believed every word. At first, I understood why people were worried. Because if someone told me governments wanted to decide where I could travel, I'd be concerned too. So I did what everyone should do before believing something this serious. I started looking for evidence, not opinions, not reaction videos, evidence. And almost immediately, something didn't add up. Every article making these extraordinary claims pointed back to the same handful of stories. Oxford, traffic cameras, COVID lockdowns, climate change, the World Economic Forum. It looked convincing, at least at first. But the deeper I looked, the stranger it became. Because the evidence wasn't pointing toward one giant conspiracy. It was pointing toward something much more interesting, a misunderstanding, one that snowballed across the internet until millions of people believed a story that barely resembled the original idea. So let's rewind, because to understand how this happened, we have to go back to the moment everything changed. The timing couldn't have been worse. For nearly 3 years, the world had lived through COVID-19. Governments introduced lockdowns, travel restrictions, curfews, border closures. Whether you agreed with those decisions or not, one thing was certain: trust had taken a hit. People were more skeptical than ever. Then, just as life was beginning to feel normal again, cities started talking about reducing traffic, encouraging walking, building more cycle lanes, creating neighborhoods where everyday essentials were closer to home. To urban planners, it was simply another discussion about designing better cities. To many people online, it looked suspiciously familiar. Restrictions, climate policies, less driving, more government involvement. The puzzle pieces started fitting together, even though they belonged to completely different puzzles. And then, Oxford entered the story. If there's one place responsible for turning this idea into a global conspiracy, it's probably Oxford. In late 2022, Oxfordshire County Council announced plans to introduce traffic filters on 6 busy roads. The goal was straightforward: reduce congestion during peak hours, encourage drivers to use different routes. That's all. But online, those traffic filters became something else entirely. Traffic management became they're locking people into districts. Alternative routes became you need permission to leave. Within weeks, the internet had transformed a local traffic proposal into a worldwide conspiracy. And once social media got involved, there was no slowing it down, because fear spreads much faster than nuance. And the algorithm, it loves fear. But here's the question nobody seemed to ask. What is a 15-minute city actually? Because by now, we've spent several minutes talking about what people think it is. It's finally time to find out what it really means. After everything I'd read, I was expecting something complicated, some hidden policy, some government document that everyone had overlooked. Instead, I found something surprisingly ordinary. The phrase 15-minute city was introduced by urban planning professor Carlos Moreno in 2016. And the idea can be explained in one sentence. What if most of the places you use every day were only 15 minutes away from where you live? That's it, seriously. That's the idea everyone has been arguing about. So, what does that look like? Imagine leaving your house. The grocery store is a short walk away. Your doctor is nearby. Your child's school is around the corner. There's a park within walking distance, a cafe on the next street, a pharmacy a few blocks away. You could walk, ride a bike, take public transport, or drive if you wanted to. Notice something? Nobody took away your car. Nobody stopped you from traveling. Nobody built a wall around your neighborhood. The entire goal is simply to make everyday life a little more convenient. Wait, then why did everyone panic? Because the internet rarely rewards boring explanations. Think about it. Which headline gets your attention? Urban planners discuss mixed-use development, or they're turning cities into open-air prisons. Exactly. Fear spreads. Nuance doesn't. As more creators talked about 15-minute cities, the story kept changing. Every retelling added another layer. Traffic filters became checkpoints. Urban planning became surveillance. Convenience became control. Eventually, the conspiracy barely resembled the original proposal. It's a bit like starting with a recipe for pancakes and ending with a story about dragons. Somewhere along the way, reality got left behind, but here's the important part. The purpose of a 15-minute city isn't to stop people from driving, it's to stop driving from being your only practical option. Think about your own town. How many simple errands require getting in a car, buying milk, picking up medicine, dropping children at school, grabbing a coffee? Modern cities often separate everything. Homes in one area, shops in another, offices somewhere else, schools somewhere else again. That means more traffic, longer commutes, and more time sitting behind a steering wheel. Urban planners looked at that and asked one simple question: what if everyday destinations were closer together? Not, how do we stop people from traveling? Those are completely different questions, ironically. For most of human history, and this was completely normal, before giant highways, before suburban sprawl, people usually lived close to where they worked. They walked to local shops, walked to school, walked to markets, walked to cafes. Nobody called it a 15-minute city. It was simply a town. Urban planners aren't trying to invent some futuristic society. In many ways, they're trying to bring back something we already had. Does that mean the idea is perfect? Not at all. And this is where I think some conversations get lost. There are genuine criticisms. Could improving neighborhoods increase housing prices? Possibly. Would every city be able to adopt this idea? Probably not. Would rural communities benefit in the same way as dense cities? Not necessarily. Those are real debates. Urban planners discuss them all the time, but notice the difference. Saying, "I'm worried this policy could increase housing costs," is completely different from saying, "The government is secretly building an open-air prison." One is a policy discussion, the other is a conspiracy theory, and confusing the two makes it harder to have honest conversations about either. By this point, the conspiracy was already falling apart. There were no travel permits, no neighborhood prisons, no invisible boundaries, just an urban planning proposal that had been transformed by the internet into something almost unrecognizable. But there was one consequence nobody saw coming. The people behind the idea started receiving death threats, and that's where this story takes its darkest turn. The conspiracy had spread across the world, millions of views, thousands of posts, protests in the streets. But there was one consequence almost nobody was talking about. The people behind the idea became the targets. Carlos Moreno never proposed restricting where people could travel. He never suggested creating neighborhood prisons. He never called for travel permits. Yet after years of misinformation, he and his family received harassment and even death threats. Think about that. A professor proposes making everyday places easier to reach and ends up being accused of helping build a global prison. It's hard to imagine how those two ideas became connected, but that's exactly what misinformation can do. It takes one idea, changes it a little, then a little more, until eventually nobody remembers what the original idea actually was. So, is the conspiracy true? Claim. The government wants to trap people inside 15-minute zones. False. Here's what the evidence actually shows. A 15-minute city is an urban planning concept. Its goal is to place everyday services closer to where people live. It doesn't stop you from traveling, it doesn't stop you from driving, and there is no credible evidence that cities implementing the idea are secretly preparing to imprison residents inside their neighborhoods. That doesn't mean every policy is perfect, or that every city should adopt it. Those are completely reasonable debates to have, but those debates should be based on evidence, not fear. So why did millions believe it? Because misinformation rarely starts with a complete lie. It usually starts with something real. A real proposal, a real headline, a real event. Then someone misunderstands it. Someone exaggerates it. Someone creates a dramatic video. The algorithm notices people are watching. More creators repeat the story. Each version becomes slightly more sensational than the last, and eventually, the conspiracy becomes more popular than the truth. Not because it's better supported, because it's more entertaining. Fear travels fast. Facts usually have to walk. The strange part of this story isn't that people question the idea. People should question new ideas. People should question governments. People should ask difficult questions. That's healthy. The strange part is how quickly questions turned into certainty. How could this happen became this is definitely happening without the evidence ever catching up, because skepticism only works if we apply it equally, not just to governments, but to viral posts, influencers, podcasts, headlines, and even videos like this one. If someone makes an extraordinary claim, ask them one simple question: what's the evidence? If the evidence is solid, follow it. If it isn't, don't follow the crowd. The 15-minute city didn't become controversial because of what it was. It became controversial because of what people imagined it was. And that's an important difference, because sometimes the biggest conspiracy isn't the one being discussed. It's the story that grows when facts are replaced by assumptions. If you enjoyed this investigation, leave a like and subscribe to Why It's Not True. Every week we investigate another conspiracy, separate fact from fiction, and ask one simple question: why is it not true? Until next time, stay curious, question everything, but most importantly, follow the evidence wherever it leads.